Here we go.
All right, here we are.
Welcome, Lee.
Yeah, happy to be here.
He's a teacher. He has more than 6 years of experience, and honestly, he's an amazing blog writer.
Oh, you're too kind. Yeah, I love to write. I love to create, and I feel like development is almost just like a side piece of that. Like, I like to just summarize what I do as creative, whether that's building websites or music or design work. I really like to make things and just put them out into the world. That's kind of my go-to. Even writing too.
I would start from the design intersection I saw that you are having in your work, because as a writer, one of your best articles has reached like 50K of views. That is about style guides, design systems, and component libraries, and you will say, wait, is this a developer or is a designer to just this kind of amazing content, right? So I was impressed about that accuracy, and based on your experience, how do you evaluate the multidisciplinary nature of a designer who knows how to code, or the other way back around? So because nowadays in the industry there's this kind of tricky balance, and I'm super curious to know more about your point of view of that.
Yeah. First, I can talk about how I guess I got interested in design and kind of why I wrote that article. So I've kind of been interested in design for a long time. Back when I was, just in high school, I worked at a graphic design shop, and I designed T-shirts for local sports teams, which was kind of cool. And I really enjoyed that, learning Photoshop, Illustrator. And I was debating on going to college for graphic design. But at the end of the day, I decided, I was really weird. I was between graphic design, music, or engineering. And I decided to do engineering, which...
Wow, interesting.
Just all over the board. It made no sense. So I've had that flame, I guess, of interest for a long time. And then I think part of that interest is what gravitates me towards the front end of development, because I like the visual aspect of it. I always find that really interesting. Then at work, my current job right now, there was a period where I realized that there was a lot of duplication of pieces of the front end, and there was an opportunity to make that better by building this component library and saving a lot of the engineers' time, and also making our design better in the process. And that was an effort that I led up for a while. And in the process of just learning about that and researching for over the course of really a year, I learned a lot about what is a component library, what is a design system, how do they work together, and then how do the designers and the engineers kind of work together, because that's really the underlying piece there that gets missed a lot of the time, is the collaboration piece, which is probably the most difficult part. That's kind of how I got into it and what got me interested in it. But then as far as evaluating engineers who can design or designers who can code, I think for engineers who can design, for me, it's understanding some of those fundamentals, which you're going to have to work for it. I think a lot of people think that they'll just, on the engineering side, they just think they'll luck into design, but it's something that you have to intentionally work for and understand, because at the end of the day, this is my opinion on it, there's different avenues of creativity, but there's still a core level of fundamentals that are going to make your designs better. If you get better at those fundamentals, whether that's understanding topography or colors, palettes, or any of that stuff, you're probably going to end up with a better design. And a lot of engineers just don't want to take the time to learn that. So those who do, and they learn from hopefully quality materials or resources, are just going to be able to produce better designs and merge that gap. And then also, I think, there's some people, engineers, who just have an ability or a desire to really want to learn, and they want to be a more encompassing, well-rounded individual. And usually those type of people are entrepreneurial, and they like to build their own products, because if you are doing that, you have to do everything. and I feel like that's a lot of how I see the engineers who also get into design. On the other way around, seeing designers who also have a thirst for understanding the underworking of how the code works. It's almost a same thread, where they have to have that desire to want to learn, and then be willing to make something, dive into the code, even though it's going to be unfamiliar, and spend the time to understand some of those fundamentals so that they can kind of empathize on both sides.
What do you think is more difficult? Is it more difficult for an engineer, for a developer about design, or is it more difficult for a designer to learn how to code and the principles of technology?
And then that will add quickly an immediate question to that one, just super quick. Who would you hire first?
Where it gets difficult too is if you're talking about just front-end engineers or front-end and back-end engineers. I think it's probably easier to teach a front-end engineer design than it is to enter a back-end engineer into the world of not only the front end, but also on the design side. In that case, it would probably be easier to make a designer understand, the pieces of the back end of how those systems work. Because being a front-end engineer, you have to at least start to understand some of the pieces of design. Like you're getting your feet wet, you might not be proficient at it yet. Like I've definitely seen front-end engineers who, even though they can build a website, it just doesn't look good. So there's still room to go there. So it's very, very difficult because it probably depends on where that person's strength is. I mean, there's also different layers of designers, right? If we're talking more on the UI side or more on the user experience side, I feel like more of the UI side probably gravitates more to coding versus the UX side is probably more on the I want to go do user testing or go talk to people.
You know what? It's very interesting because you're pretty much, and maybe we'll do a screenshot here for the people that are watching on YouTube of the article we did about the recipe for a modern designer. We literally touched probably each one of those aspects that you said. We got the front end the UX, UI, the visual, the interface. And I think it's very true. I believe that by listening to what you're saying, we're kind of having the confirmation that was similar to even what Matteo said, Matteo Gobbi, in a previous interview we had, that we're moving into this new role of a designer where there is literally a blend. There is no more, separation between I'm a developer and I'm a designer. No, it's like the new role of this new maker is someone that can understand, understand the principle of design and how to put those things together, right, in a way that works. And now you can translate them actually in something that works. That would be the front-end engineering. So I love that.
And then even building off that further, if I had to choose who to hire first, I think that if you are just trying to get a product off the ground and you don't even know if you have product market fit or if anyone's going to buy it or sign up for it, there's probably more resources like a UI kit or Tailwind UI or something that a designer or a developer can buy that's going to give them a pretty good design even though they might not understand why, and allow them to get the product off the ground faster versus trying to coach that designer through the engineering process. But then you have to look at it, and this is one thing I've started to realize a lot, is that every technical decision you make, you have to also consider the system design of your organization. So if you're if you're a solo founder, if you're one person, then that makes a lot of sense, right? But if you're at an organization of thousands of people, your design work is probably very intricate and hyper focused to maybe the market that you're on, or you're doing something really custom, right? You're not going to be able to pull a dashboard kit off of some website for $50. It's got to be completely custom. And in that case, the design aspect is so much more important because it's going to have to be fully custom.
But for those that might be a little bit less into this world, you mentioned something that nowadays I don't want to see is the silver bullet for a number of companies, but this concept of the design system is something that has been growing a lot. And I'm talking for the people that might not be familiar with it. A design system is pretty much almost a set of guidelines and templates that companies use when they build anything within that company, whether it's a product or a service. They kind of almost, it's like their Bible, if you want to use a religious reference, but it's way more functional, right? So
reusable.
It's almost like a blueprint. You go in and you have all your different components and colors and style guide. So by using that, it's really a powerful way to meet together the functionalities that you have on the tech side together with the creativity that you believe serves best the people and the customer. So that I wanted to share that with the people who might be listening to us. And I agree. Like I'm glad that you mentioned it, because design system is one of the most trending things that we've seen in the market, that not only in the US.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting too about design systems is, at its core, this whole push and industry adoption of design systems is really more about a closer merger between a designer and developer. Like, it's all about that communication between the two, because if one side of that relationship is lacking, then it doesn't really work. Like, if you have a great component library, but you're not really paying attention to the different UX patterns in your application, like, it doesn't matter that you have a button if you use it differently in 10 different places in your application. So you have to really have like both worlds put together there, like your style guide and your components, and then actually put it into like this living, breathing, like you said, blueprint for people to build off of. I think it works a lot better when there's dedicated teams like working on that at an organization, which again comes from like a certain level of scale of company.
Okay, depend by the size of the company, but at which point would you imagine that makes sense to start thinking systems?
Yeah, so I think like for a company that's just starting out, where all of your assets are maybe in like one single place, like you have one website, one application, you probably don't need a design system. Like, it's probably overkill at that point. There are tools out there that allow you to develop, pieces of your application in, components or little chunks. And that can be really helpful for the design and engineering side of things. But still, like, if you're only in the shell of one application, it's probably not that big of a deal. Now, as you start to scale and you have maybe a massive application, it's grown a lot, or more crucially, I feel like you have separate applications across different domains. And usually this comes with like different independent teams, right? So if I have, 100 engineers, like, it's probably not feasible for them all to be working in the same exact application, all contributing at the same time. So that's where you get different teams, just managing 5 to 7 groups of people in different areas. And then now you have this fragmentation in your organization, and this team can be over here on the left in a silo, just building stuff, not really considering how it affects the rest of the ecosystem and how that all plays together. And I think that's about the time that you need to start thinking of the cohesive integration of it all. Like, how do all these pieces fit together? And that's where I feel like the designers and the people who work on these systems help to kind of bring it all together, so that you don't have a different looking button in like 100 different places in your application.
Well, if someone was wondering why Raf was calling you a great teacher, now I think I got the reason why. I love the way you explained it.
Yeah. For me, teaching, like, one of those things is like, once I spend the time to really understand something and I invest that work in knowing all the fundamentals, then I do a much better job of explaining it. So like, I feel like I am able to talk about design systems and component libraries pretty well, because I spend a good chunk of time understanding the why. Like, not only the why, but then how you actually apply that to things, and then where you would apply it. There's definitely plenty of things that I would stumble over when trying to explain, but luckily I've spent enough time in the merger between design and development where I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on most things there. Teaching was something that I kind of just stumbled into it. Like, I didn't really realize that I was becoming a teacher. Really, it all started probably like 2013, 2014. I started to write online, just blogging, mostly because I would stumble on a problem. I would, research something online and be like, why was this so hard to find? Like, why did this answer not exist somewhere? And I get frustrated, be like, all right, well, I'm going to post it online so that the next person who hits this doesn't have the same problem. And that kind of led to me not only writing about technical things that I solved and figured out, or that I'm just interested in and I wanted to learn more, but then also just the love of writing and just putting stories down, mostly so that I can look back on it in 10 years and be like, oh wow, I'm really glad that I wrote this down about this experience, so I know exactly how I was feeling in that time. And that's when I'll write about like more personal things on my blog or whatever. So that was really what kicked off I guess, the writing online aspect. And I didn't realize that that was going to merge into becoming a teacher until I started to do it more. And I got the feedback, like, oh, this article was really helpful. Like, I'm glad that you explained this. And it started to merge not only that, but I've always enjoyed like photography and videography too. And I started doing some freelance like videography, making videos for weddings and concerts and like events like that. And as I started to learn more about the video side of things, I kind of put two and two together, where now I was also educating through the medium of video, which is really, really helpful too for, I mean, everybody learns different, right? Some people prefer to read a blog post. Some people want to eat their lunch and watch a video. So having that out there was really, really helpful. And over time, I started to realize like, oh, I could actually do something with this. Like I could make a course and teach people, and it seems like people are interested in it. So I might as well give it a shot.
Could you give us more details about your teaching method? Because it's what I mostly love. I'm a designer, I work in the design field, and honestly, Federico, I understand some very good basic of Next.js thanks to this guy. And for those who may not know, Next.js, it's a server-side framework based on top of React that if you go to leerob.io, you can see how blazingly, insanely fast that website is. How did you plan to arrive in this teaching method, or it was just yourself in the way that it works for people to understand, oh, this seems work, this seems something that I enjoy?
What's like one really funny thing that I've realized, especially doing my new course, which we'll talk about later, probably React 2025. With that course, you know, I'm doing everything live streams. And what I started to realize in doing that is that a lot of that process is like the debugging process for coding. So debugging, for those who might not know, is basically like there's an issue with my application and I'm trying to figure out what it is. And a lot of the time, like when I'm doing these live streams, you know, I'm stumbling on the problems just like anybody else would be as they're building it themselves. And one of the skills that more experienced developers tend to pick up is, you know, if you're working with somebody else, you need to be able to explain what's going on in your head. Like you have to basically talk out loud because they're not going to read your mind and they don't know what's going on. So as you're working through these problems and you're trying new things, I'm just sitting here. I'm like, okay, well, I tried this, like this didn't work. All right, so let's try this and see if this works. Like, here's why I'm trying it. Like really putting my brain on the radio and just making it so everyone's like has insight into what I'm thinking. And I feel like that aspect of it, coupled with having like a good base of understanding of the domain that we're talking about, leads to a pretty good recipe for success for education, right? Like there's going to be things I stumble on that I don't know, but since I have a good fundamental understanding of what I'm trying to teach, it's easier for me to put the dots together and figure out, oh, okay, like I know why this isn't working. It's probably because of this thing, and like retrace my steps back. And I think that helps because a lot of the time for people taking courses, trying to learn more about programming, like that's the part that they need mentorship on the most, which is like, something's wrong and help me fix it. And I need to learn how to do that better so that when I'm on my own, I have the skills to do that. Maybe the reason that I've gotten good at that is because I was so bad at interviewing when I got into engineering. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I think about some of my first interviews that I had to do, like the whiteboarding exercises and like explaining these problems out loud, and I would like completely freeze up. I would just be like, oh my gosh, my brain is just blank. I have no idea what's going on. And it took a lot of work to get better at that. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
We mentioned your new project called React 2025, and it's literally your new training that you'll be launching next week. I personally love the bold statement that's all about starting developing a website like it's 2025. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
So the name comment's really funny because I like the name. I've had a few people be like, is this a conference? Like, is this an ebook? Like, I don't really know what this is until they go to the website and they check it out and they're like, oh, okay, like it's a video course. But really the idea for React 2025 came from multiple conversations that I had with people who are front-end engineers or maybe even like full stack engineers And they would say things like, why is this so difficult? Like, why does it need to be this way? I just want to build an application and deploy it and like focus on the product. Like, I don't want to worry about all these really intricate details that somebody else has already figured out. Like, it's 2020, like somebody should have already figured this out and built something for it. And then I started reading a little bit more about just some of the tools that I've been using and kind of their vision for the future. And I reflected a little and I was like, what is React going to look like in 2025? Because it's already been, 5 years of React, and it's stabilized a lot in the past few years. Like, I mean, there was just a React 17 released with no changes basically, which is kind of crazy after like 2 years. So it's like the community has stabilized a little bit there. So I feel pretty confident that React will be around in 5 years. There's tons of adoption there. So what will it actually look like? And I guess my take on it, my opinion, is that there's a lot of really great tooling being built right now to make it easier for not only people to get into programming who might not have previously known anything about it, so designers too, and then also just simplifying what that workflow looks like for somebody building these applications, right? Like, you see people who launch products on Product Hunt, and it's like they just had a Google sheet and then they like threw some HTML in there and they're like done, and like now they're making like thousands of dollars. Like, it's just insane, some of the tools out there that allow people to launch websites. Like, people can launch websites and just use something like Webflow, and they don't even have to really like know how to do any of that stuff. And I think that bar is going to continue to drop down to where it's super approachable for people to learn programming. This is a really long-winded way of me saying, like, the intention with the course was to kind of give my prediction of where React will be, and then explain like a new workflow for building applications that's a lot easier. And specifically, one of the things I liked about my approach here was, rather than like publish some edited videos that have been like meticulously poured over, some of the feedback I got from my last course was like, this was great, but I wish that I would have seen everything, because I know that like you didn't cover this one part, and I wish I would have seen the whole process. So with this course, with React 2025, I was like, I'm just going to live stream the entire thing, and you're going to see everything as I build a product from zero to the end. And if I screw something up, like I screw something up. If I get stuck, like I might have to go research something, but like I want it to be a true experience of what it looks like to build a product. And I think that approach has resonated with a lot of people, because a lot of the course content out there is very like curated. And it's not to say that it's a bad thing, because it depends on what a person is looking for, right? Like with a live stream course and a lot of content, like there's over 15 hours or so, like that's a lot. Like, that's a commitment if you want to watch all of that, versus like a 2-hour, like super edited, curated, I don't have time for that thing. Like, different people are going to want different things, but this was an opportunity I saw that, something like this that I wish existed. So that's kind of why I guess I went this approach.
Before going into tell more about when it got to be released and the data and the dates about React 2025, what is something that I really like is the insights part that you take from Next.js. So you were discussing different models, mm-hmm. and you said, okay, for what I've learned from Next.js, I think this is the future of what I see most insights on. And through this testing, it was really inspiring for me to understand that you learn from your, not errors, but from your first experience. That it was, for me, was still great. And the fact that you managed to upgrade that as a new skill, as a new video, it's amazing. But
yeah, like to your point, like, so the context there is, before React 2025, I had a course called Mastering Next.js, and I ran that as a paid course for a while, and then I ended up making it free just because I wanted everybody to be able to do it, and I learned a lot. And like, it's even the little things, like I had feedback from customers that said, I wish that the font size in your editor was bigger. Like, I was like, well, I thought it was already pretty big, but I can make it even bigger, right? Or like, I wish the audio was like a little bit louder. So I like tried to take all of that comments, because it was my first attempt. I tried to take all that feedback and put it into something that was a little bit better, because I'm learning as I go, trying to build the best experience there. And a lot of that I feel like has helped me curate and improve at the second attempt, like trying to make this a better experience.
We are all learning by doing. It's great.
Oh yeah. And like even not only on the student experience, but also on the like distribution experience. Creating a course is such a like multidisciplinary thing. Like you have to know, well, whatever your topic is, right? So for me, it's engineering. You have to understand design so that you can like make a website and like market it. You have to know marketing. You have to know sales so people can buy it. You know, you're doing customer communication, so you have to have that empathy with the people who maybe they want a refund or maybe, you know, they stumbled on this error. Like you have to understand everything, at least at a little bit, or figure it out or outsource it or whatever. And that's been a really fun and interesting challenge because like even like running advertising, like I'd never done that before until my last course, and I tried it and I was like, oh, like this is interesting. Like I've never done this before.
I think it's interesting because it's kind of like a two-way learning. Like not only you are learning something new by exposing yourself to new tools and new areas, right? So you're kind of like going bottom up, right? You're just saying, oh, now look at this targeting on Facebook ads. It's phenomenal. I can ask all the people in Poland. They're like age 25 to 35. I didn't know I could do that. All the people that like spaghetti, for example, you can do that, right? So it's amazing because literally blows up your mind when you see something like that. But on the other way around, by having all those different, let's say, areas that triggers, when you do, as you said, the next iteration, you bring with you all the feedback and all the lesson learned, and I would say the same way you're thinking about creating the new iteration is completely different because it's informed by everything that you learned, but also the fact that you have expanded in new areas, right? So that it's where, I mean, real education and learning by doing happens. That's why it's so powerful.
Absolutely. And like one of the greatest forms of like validation and success I feel from doing these courses is when I hear people say, you know, this helped me. I hadn't learned it until this point, and then taking your course really helped it click and like made this learn. Or somebody would reach out and say, you know, I just launched this application thanks to your course, and it's like that's a very surreal feeling for me because I didn't realize that was the position I was going to be getting into, but being able to help out people in that regard is pretty awesome.
Not only you're moving from being a maker to being an enabler, so you're allowing people to do great stuff. That maybe it's not even what you were thinking when you were creating the educational content. It's more, because you have no idea what people will use that for.
And another thing that I find really fascinating with just teaching online and creating content online is that for better or for worse, like online content exists forever or until it gets deleted. So, you know, there's blog posts that I've written in 2014 that people still email me about. There's like, hey, I stumbled onto this post about this Python thing you wrote. Like, it's really cool. Like, do you mind if I use this to do this? I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, it's just, it's hard to even comprehend that this content that you're putting out there will live on for a long time and people from all over the world can use it. Like I have a newsletter that I run where I send out just information about like blog posts that I write or any interesting things that I'm learning or course updates or whatever. And a while ago, I just put a link for like a Calendly. I was like, hey, if you want to jump on a call and just talk about anything, like here's a link, we can just get on a call and chat. And I had, like, it just blew my mind. I had people from literally all over the world just get on a call and we would talk for like 20, 30 minutes about anything. Could be about programming, could be about courses, just shooting the breeze. Like, and it's just crazy the scale of the internet, I guess, or the impact that you can have. Like, I would have never expected I'd be on a call with somebody on the other side of the world, you know, just talking about programming.
It's also the fact that, I mean, we live in a place that in the United States tends to be very advanced, even if it's not Silicon Valley, but where all the technology and the infrastructure is way more advanced compared to, I mean, Europe or, I mean, Africa or whatever. But the funny part is that as those other places are progressing, they might think, oh, Python is the next big thing. And then they get there and it's like, oh, wait, but now there's something like React, right? So it's good for them because you kind of accelerate where they are so fast. and you don't realize that we almost come in with a bias. Like we're always chasing the white rabbit, and we're always chasing the latest technology and functionalities, but we do not realize that some of the tools that we do have are not available for everyone or are not so common for everyone. So there is this amazing wow effect. Like early before this conversation, I was talking to Raffaele and I mentioned about a tool that actually is a product that Facebook has that is called the Portal. And they don't have it like in Italy yet, right?
Yep.
And it's not that common, at least. I haven't checked, but it was wait.
I told to him like, what is this thing? It's like new VR or something. I've never mentioned it before.
Yeah, even Calendly.
I didn't have one, but they are crazy.
Yeah, no, there is like a bunch. You mentioned Calendly and a bunch of tools. I can tell you, every time I go back to Italy, even if I work with my former colleagues back to when I was in Milan, and sometimes we chat about like apps that to me is the normal, and they're like, wait, what is that? And then I realized, okay, we do not live in the same place, in the same space, in the same kind of like normality, right? So it's great.
What's funny too is even in the United States, like the difference between the coast and the Midwest is crazy. Like, so I live in Iowa in the Midwest, and I remember like when Uber became a thing, it took like 3 years for it to get to Iowa. Like it was like very popular in SF, and then like 3 years later, we finally had drivers in Iowa. Like I would go on vacation whenever I'd use Uber or whatever, and I'd come back and be like, yeah, Midwest, like we still don't have it. Like even in the United States, like there's a little bit of that too.
I noticed one more thing in as I was going through your website, actually your blog. I love that, and I want to congratulate with you on your engagement. So I found out that there are a lot of goals and that are both like professional and personal life, and
Yep.
this is very interesting. It's something that we discussed in one of our episodes. Right, we talk about the work-life balance, and we discuss how we call them work-life priorities and how you plan for your work-life balance. I love that it comes across immediately as you're very organized and you know what would make you happy. You almost plan for it, so it felt very organic too. So I wanted to ask you more. How do you plan for your work-life balance, and what is the work-life balance for you?
Yeah, so funny story about the engagement stuff. Just with 2020 being crazy, like we were supposed to get married in June, and coronavirus happened, and we decided to push it back. And then June came, and we were like, you know what? We're just gonna go get married, like just at a very small wedding. So we went and got married, and it was great. It worked out so good. It was just our immediate family, and that was awesome. So my work-life balance is definitely a huge part of my life, because I want to make sure that I never let work consume me too much and forget about kind of my like hierarchy of needs or what's the most important to me. So for me, it's like my family is probably always going to be number one, and then my friends and my hobbies or things that I like to do, and then work comes in probably underneath it somewhere there. So I try to make sure in everything that I'm grounded by spending time with my family. Luckily, like I mentioned, I live in Iowa, so my parents live like an hour away. My sister lives like 20 minutes away. So it's nice that I'm able to see them pretty frequently. And then my wife and her family also lives close too, so that's awesome. And she helps me stay pretty grounded on making sure that I don't spend every waking hour like building programming things or like stuck online. Like she helps me disconnect there a little bit too. But yeah, work-life balance it's very important for me, because I'm also a person who really likes to travel and just get out and see the world and see other cultures and have that experience, whether with my wife or my friends or whatever. And I make sure that I've never since I've worked professionally, like I've never had an unused vacation day. Like I use them all. Like they're always gone. And I try to get out and travel as much as I can, even if that's like an hour away. Just I want to make sure that I'm doing something and getting that disconnect.
I believe that now we have the one and only Raffaele that I think moving on will be the only responsible for the signature question. I just made it up, but I decided it's done. It's done. Right. It's happening. Go with the signature question.
Thank you for the honor, Federico. My signature question for you, Lee, is about your definition of designer, not in 2025, but now with a vision that goes beyond 2025. So what is your definition of design?
Yeah, I think when I'm thinking about design, like for this definition, it will be specifically for like the realm of software, because the definition probably varies depending on industry. So specifically for the software space, like to me, a designer is an artist who crafts the experience of an application. And like for me, the important piece there is it's about that experience almost more than it is about how it looks. And I think that's more of a timeless definition as we go into the future, because you're going to have tools that are going to make it easier to get UI elements out there on the screen, but the actual experience and what it feels like to use the application is something that the designer is still like in charge of 100%.
If the future would be no code, like...
Yeah, 100%. Like if you are building your website on a drag and drop thing, like you can still do that wrong. Like it can still be a terrible experience. Like it can be confusing workflows and, you know, crazy color schemes or whatever it might be. So when you step back and think about how do I design an experience that's not only easy to use, but, you know, joyful or happy for people to use, that's where that designer role in the software world, I feel like, is such a huge and important piece.
That's awesome. Lee, it was a pleasure. Before leaving you, we just want to point out when React 2025 come out actually.
Yeah.
And how people can connect with you to get in touch with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been a blast just talking about everything design, engineering, and React 2025 comes out next Monday, so August 24th, I believe. August 24th. So maybe by the time you're watching this, it's already out there. But yeah, you can check it out at react2025.com, or you can get in touch with me at leerob.io. Feel free to send me an email about anything, and I'll get back to you.
So,
all right. Thank you. Bye.
Pleasure.